Welcome to episode 2 of Talking Sense and Golf. This week we are joined by an absolute short game genius in Lewis Savill. And not only is he a short game legend, he also is a bit of a player. And for anyone that doesn't know Lewis, I'm going to get him just to start off with a little background of how he got into golf and his journey in golf at the moment. So fire away for us, Lewis.
So I got into golf a little bit later than most people. I got into golf about 10 years old. Uncle took me down the driving range in Gravesend, said he'd give me a mile balls over the 50-yard flag, not balls over, asked if I got my Mars bar. The response was absolutely not. And then from there, I was basically hooked. So it sort of realized why I was probably fat by the time I was 20. Just got really addicted to golf from there pretty much. I got down, I temper off with one handicap. I was playing at Mid-Kent Golf Club. Very much a one-track pony though. That didn't transfer at all. I didn't understand the skills that I needed to do to actually be able to play around multiple golf courses. Then you turn pro and every game is an away game. There's no such thing as a home medal. You're trying to trying to apply your skills on a different golf course every time. So straight away you go from knowing every shot to knocking it around in 80 and trying to work out where you're bad at golf. So I would say for me, it very much was like an eye-opening experience of like, right, I thought I was good and I'm really, really, really not. Then ground out really hard. I used to live at Tandridge, so I stayed above the shop, and there was a short game area that was probably 70 yards from my bedroom, and I used to just live on it. So I found the lowest hanging fruit to make my scores better. I've never been a long hitter, so I was like, well, there's no point being short and sucking with wedges. So I decided to get better short game wise. Started winning some golf events.
There is also a lot of you shouldn't suck if you hit it long. You also shouldn't suck with wedges. So the common denominator there is be good with wedges.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with you. I mean, if you're long, you're going to have more wedges in than if you hit it short. Certainly. So from there, actually managed to somehow scramble around and win a few events in the South Region PGA, and then had a real sort of change of direction, realized that I absolutely loved looking after people, loved coaching, loved just seeing the improvement way more than I did grinding for 10 hours on a freezing cold driving range, which I can't work out why that would be. And yeah, just I still had this obsession with short game, worked out who I thought was the most intelligent people that I could contact and annoyed as many as possible until they eventually talked to me. And that's kind of where I am now. I'm still annoying a lot of them. Still trying to wind some of them up. They will eventually talk to me, I promise.
Could you name drop a few that you have? Who's probably the 3 that you've learned the most off of?
So without a doubt, obviously, I think Alex Buckner's brilliant.
Yeah,
fantastic. Probably one of the better coaches I've seen live in terms of not just short game, just an absolutely mega golf coach.
Yeah, and I must say,
yeah, he's a really nice guy as well. With it, is as sound as they come. So he was really eye-opening in terms of actually. I went there and I ghosted Alex for a day, and it's going to sound really weird, and it's the biggest backhanded compliment I can give. The technical knowledge didn't blow me away. There wasn't anything, but the way he delivered it, the structure of the lesson, just everything was mega. It made me realize that there's a lot to being a great coach, not just knowing different grip types and various bits and bobs. So that was amazing. He's been really, really, really helpful. I think obviously James Ridyard making Wedge Matrix, doing all that stuff really as kind of the other end of the spectrum where I learned a lot from. And then finally, Hugh Ma's definitely been a big help for me. again, more in terms of the organization and the structure of that information. I kind of had a lot of stuff hiding in a lot of cupboards, and there was no organization to it. I sort of had to pull open every cupboard to find what I wanted, and being able to categorize it and find it and store it was a really big thing. Like, you've done quite a lot of work with you as well, right?
I have done a lot of work with you, yeah. And what you're talking about is almost like that toolbox, isn't it? It's having all those tools in the toolbox to be able to pull out on the right person at the right time, which is
Yeah,
the art of coaching.
100%. I mean, I'd say that, like, if you look at my toolbox a year ago and now, it's probably no more full. It's just everything's organized as a compartment. And I know what tool should do what job, or at least have a better idea of that now. And I think that's really, really important, especially when we're talking about getting people better quicker.
100%. 100%. Where do we start with short game then? So if we were to have a TrackMan or a GC quad, whatever, on a chip shot, what would be your most important data point to look at?
So I think this is really interesting. So I would say, if I was going to go most important, I think when we're talking a lot about chipping nowadays, we're talking about low point depth, right? So low point location, it gives you on a TrackMan before and after. The only thing it doesn't give you at the moment, obviously, is how deep that is. So I think if I was going to use a TrackMan, I'd be looking at low point location, definitely. And I'd also be looking at smash factor. So someone a lot cleverer than me, that I can't remember who said it, so if I quoted you, I'm so sorry. They said the art of good golf is to speed the ball up in the long game and slow it down in the short game. So I think realistically, when I see a lot of people day to day doing short game stuff, they're too efficient. They're too good at compressing the ball. So I kind of frame it as like, I'm about to give you the world's worst long game lesson. Like right now, I would be the world's worst long drive coach, because we're going to be so inefficient. We're going to get the ball speed so low relative to club head speed. And then that's going to give them the confidence to then be able to hit these shots that travel no distance with a relatively aggressive or confident motion.
We did, just on that, we did we did a little bit of testing at Reigate Hill when we was on Hugh Mars course, and we found out that it was about, you had to double the club speed, literally about double the club speed when you wanted to almost hit a shot with a more open club face, which, I mean, who thinks about that? How much more speed? If you're hitting a 20-yard shot, you're probably wanting about 20 yards on a normal chip shot. You're probably wanting a 20-mile-an-hour-ish swing. But as soon as you jump up to hitting that 20-yard shot that has to be a flop shot, you then have to swing at 40 miles an hour, which is probably half of someone's normal club speed with a 7-6 iron, which is just crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. And I just think that, and I'm sure you see it as well when we're on the short game area, like, we just get these people that are so good at compressing it, and that's great. But that means, if we've got, say, a smash factor that's too efficient, they're going to swing the club slower, therefore they're going to produce less spin, lower launch. Suddenly they're going to need a wall at the back of the green to stop it. Yeah. Whereas if we've got something coming in where they're able to, like you say, double the club head speed, well, the ball's still traveling the same distance with double the club head speed. There's going to be more spin. There's going to be a higher land angle. So we're going to stop the ball that much quicker. So there's your control element of it.
Yeah. So have you got, on a stock chip shot from the fairway, do you have a smash factor range that you're looking for, or does it vary from player to player?
I'd say it varies dependent on the player to player. I like people to have a favorite shot. So same way someone might particularly prefer to play a draw off the tee, I think people have a window that they like to see. I'm really lucky to coach some truly phenomenal players that I'll never admit that they beat me in a chipping comp, but they probably would. And I've got a lad who's great, but he hits it knee high to a grasshopper, and therefore we're probably going to see a higher smash factor on him. So we're going to have to be a lot more careful about swing length and those sorts of things. And I've got other guys that like to fly the whole way to the pin. So I think from that perspective, I can't have a preference, because I can have a preference from shot to shot. Like obviously, if we want it higher, definitely lower smash factor. If we want it lower, definitely higher smash factor. But I don't want to let my preference outweigh what the student wants to see, because at the end of the day, they're the one that's got to stand there with their medal on the line, with a check on the line, and try and get up and down. Like I want them to be able to play the shot they see it.
Yep. Would you vary smash factor from lie conditions, or would you still want to see a similar smash coming out of from a fairway to a rough to a bunker to whatever the lie may be?
I think smash factor will vary in terms of the more interference I get in the way of something, naturally the ball's going to start to come out slower. So I think that the variance will be in the lie, and adjusting and adapting to the lie is the key. So from rough we're going to lose friction, so therefore ball's going to launch higher with less spin. Also, ball's going to come off softer. So we've got a ball that's launching higher, coming off softer. We've already lost the battle in smash factor.
Yep.
Therefore, we're going to have to swing it quicker, whether we like it or not. It's just whether we double down on that and try and stop it with land angle, because we can't with spin. And then that'd be the really interesting one, because then I'd imagine that you're probably going to start seeing a swing almost 60 miles an hour for that 20-yard shot.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, interesting, because we never tested it. We tested it off of a fairway condition, which is interesting. So yeah, would be very true. So difference in variables between fairway and rough.
Well played.
Opening a can of worms.
So I think, again, I'm going to be that guy and say it depends. It depends on the rough. It depends on the grass type. You can certainly see from the guys on TV, like they get into rough some weeks and it looks absolutely fine, like they can miss the green. And then there's sometimes they miss the green a foot off and it's toast. So I think we've got to come up with a better explanation than fairway and rough. I think that certainly from the understanding that I've got, and again from someone who's traveled a lot more than me and stealing some ideas off Buck here, is lie reading such a big part of his process. And I think that's the biggest thing that I learned about. I put a story out on my Instagram maybe about 2 weeks ago. It was really good. It was Ian Porter hitting a bit of a flub shot, and he leaves it in front of him, and I sort of asked why this happened, and I think I got about 20 replies. All of them were leaning back, technique, Every short game coach that messaged me was like, oh, it's Bermuda grass that week, it was into the grain, it was like this. And suddenly, it was uphill. They were coming up with all the kind of the environmental factor reasons, and suddenly everyone else was getting lost in the technique. And the camera was so far zoomed away, I couldn't have told you what his technique did if I wanted to. And so it's amazing.
That level, technique's got to be pretty established.
You'd argue Poltzer's a pretty good short gamer, wouldn't you? Yeah. A guy who's maximized his ability and talent, and does things right a lot of the time. I think you've got to go with, okay, he's probably made a misassessment on reading the lie. He had to hit a high shot that was ball first, which, as you probably know from your like testing with and stuff like that, that's really quite hard to do if you're really trying to get it up in the air. And I think that when we look back and when we problem solve, a lot of the times we can root back to misreading a lie, just same way we would misread a putt. But in the answer with short game, it's always been, my technique wasn't good enough. I did this, I did that. I think our feedback loop in a lot of golf has been pretty poor, to say the least. I try and perform. I didn't perform the way I want. Okay, well, I'll go back to my technique. Is my technique good? Right, okay, it looks better on camera. Right, I'll go and perform. All right, I still didn't perform the way I want. Must have not done my technique right. When realistically, we know there's so many different parts of it, right? What was my read like? What was my environment like? How was my process on that shot? Did I take enough time? Did I stick to my routine? Was I really specific with my landing spot? Did I pick a great flight window? And once you start asking all these questions, like I've started to just make a wedge diary for students to just go away and they can just write down key shots and things they thought about, and we can start to identify that actually some of the worst shots they hit, they fill in the least amount, because they're just kind of going through the motions. They've hit a bad shot. It's like a deer in the headlights has sort of come on. they're sort of standing there, they don't know what to do, they try and just figure something out, and they haven't applied kind of like a logical process like they would for a 7-iron out the fairway. Right, it's 150, I've got my number, wins into, right, okay, I'll club up, that sort of stuff.
Yep. So let's try and answer that question in terms of what variables would change from a decent fairway lie, to a relatively rough lie. Like what
I forgot the question then, wasn't it? I just kept going. So I think when you look at it, we're going to look at, okay, so what happens with contact first? If I was to make 2 identical swings from the same position, what would be the outcome of the rough lie? Well, okay, and this is just going back to it. So we're going to probably enter the rough before we hit the ball. So that's going to slow club down. So we're going to have to think about a way of combating that. So simple answer for me is option 1, can you just speed the club up? Or is the rough too thick to do that? Like, is there just like no point? In which case we have to look at, can I change where I enter the rough? Okay, can I steepen the angle that the club comes down so I enter the rough closer to the ball, so there's less of an interference factor? And do I need to? Then therefore, if I'm then steepening the angle that the club comes down, how do I then stop the golf ball? Because I'm now hitting 15, 20 down on something. I've lent the shaft forward to make that happen. How do I then, for the love of God, stop the thing? Because I can't do it through spin, because we've already established the rough's getting in the way. So in terms of variables, I'd try and pick the simplest one first, which is if it's a low or medium rough lie, can you do it just by simply accelerating the club and playing kind of like that bunker shot, deliberate ground interaction first, because we're going to see the ball pop up more because we lose friction. And then that's still going to give us that stopping option without changing a million variables. And I'd say for most rough lies, especially in the UK, because we don't have a grass that's that grabby, tends to work a lot. Then you'd start maybe moving pieces around, moving certainly low point forward, moving angle of attack down. But I kind of see everything like, going to sound like Hugh here, like a spectrum. Okay. Okay. So I think in short game in particular, most people kind of come and they go, right, I've got a sort of medium fly chip, I've got a bump and run, and I've got a flop shot. And I'm like, right, so you've got 0, 5, and 10.
Yeah.
Realistically, should you ever need 10? If you do, we need to talk about course management first, because that's really high. And then they pour on all these like ingredients that make it high. When realistically, if we just change one ingredient at a time, we'd end up with just this lovely graduation, and we'd be able to go up and down the scale as we see fit. So I kind of think about the same thing in terms of steepness and angle of attack when we talk about rough. Like we go, okay, well, first thing we can start to do is we might just lean your chest a little bit forward. That might be option 1. So if you're in rough that you can't quite get out of, start by trying to get your sternum in front of the golf ball. From there, okay, if that doesn't work, right, widen out your stance and now really lean into your left side. Like max out that first before you start messing around with swing arc, because that's really hard to manage when we're talking about juggling and spinning all these other plays that we're talking about, because you've still got to somehow stop that golf ball. We've still got to figure out where we want to land it. We've still got to figure out where we sit in the round that day, because I know we're told not to think about score, but I haven't seen anyone completely forget about it yet.
Yeah.
You know,
and I mean, bogey is way better than double,
right? So, is this a smart shot? That's another question. So I think the best way that I've come up with is getting people to grade shots and lies as red, amber, or green.
Yep.
So green, like easy, go for it. You should be trying to think about hitting it to a certain proximity or holding it, or it should be just like your bog standard up and down. This is you, you've got this. Amber is, okay, we better be a little bit careful with this. We're maybe not in the worst position in the world, but certainly this needs a bit more caution. And then red is like, okay, you've hit this in position Z. Maybe shouldn't have hit it here. If we had our time again, we might not. Yep. Hitting this to 15 to 20 feet is a great shot. Just take your medicine, let's figure it out, and we'll probably try and learn that shot another day, or learn why we shouldn't hit it there. If that makes sense, like just knowing when to go, okay, I'm going to hit this to 15 feet, and that's going to be absolutely acceptable, and take a bogey instead of a par.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I got a few of the bits of the data, and if you're hitting it to about, if you're 25 yards in the rough and you're hitting that to within 9 foot, I mean, you're basically tour average. So, it's not, it's something to look at when you think about when you're grading the shot as well, is knowing people should know these strokes gained, these shots where if I'm hitting that to 3 foot, I've hit a seriously good shot. If I've hit that to 13 foot, okay, I've probably lost out there, but it's not the end of the world. And I think people see on TV that you hit these guys are hitting these shots to 3, 2, 1 foot, holding it every time, and that's one in there. That's 1 in 4. They're probably missing 1 in 4 greens around, so that's 1 in 4 shots that they had that round, but that's 1 in 16 shots that they've had in that tournament, and Yamps in the rest of them. The rest of them could be to 8 foot, and people don't see that.
No, I sort of tell people that essentially there's always 70 guys on the field at any time.
Yeah.
So it's quite easy to find one where they hit it, and then there's a reason why it's called a highlight reel. Is because it's out of the norm. It's a highlight, right? So if they did that every time, it wouldn't be in the top 5 shots of the week. As simple as that. But yeah, I got the stat, which was really good, which was from 20 yards in the rough with at least 10 yards of green to work with on the PGA Tour, 50% of shots are left outside 8 feet. And when you start to look at that, and that is a pretty bog standard chip from the rough, they've got at least 10 yards of green. They're leaving that outside 8 feet. So that's where you go back to the question. And with short game, you end up doing a little bit of pattern coaching and bits and bobs. And yeah, it's amazing when you ask people from 8 feet, what's a success? And the amount of people that turn around and go, oh yeah, I'd like to hold all of these. And I'm like, yeah, me too. But no, what's a success? And realistically on the PGA Tour, that's 50%. Holding half is great. Like that means you're up there with the top 0.5% of golfers on the planet if you hold half.
And 50% of up and downs. If you're hitting that shot to 8 and you're then up and down, you are, I mean, unless you're on tour, you're pretty much well above average.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's about 20 tour guys that wouldn't be happy with that, and then the rest would be, oh, that's okay. Luke Donald being one of them, but it's certainly, I think understanding, I think to your point is great. It's what success actually is. Like if you've hit it in a stupid position, like that's why I think just doing something like some form of diary where even if you just highlighted shots from your round where you picked out a certain shot, how you were feeling, those little key moments of it.
Yeah.
And I think that would just be and that doesn't have to just be short game, that could be putting, that could be driving, it could be anything. And I think just trying it down, where the miss was, what you missed it like, and then being able to talk that through with a coach or someone is really, really valuable, because like sometimes you genuinely write it down, you're like, oh no, that was just an impossible shot.
And so I get guys to do that when I get them to change their thought process on the course. So one I like using a lot is getting guys to find cues to aim at instead of just one endlessly aiming at nothing or 2 aiming at flags. And every time they hit that shot is, can you write down what your cue was? Okay, it was bunker in the distance, it was this tree, and eventually they end up changing the way that they think, and you start scoring better purely because the cues are more external than they are emotional, and you start building better rounds like that. But writing stuff down, getting an after action report on any round of golf is just gold, because you take so much emotion out of it when you look at it back, in terms of instead of when you're looking in that round. I mean, someone hits a tour player hits a shot to 10 foot, a simple chip shot 10 foot. They're angry, but they know actually it's not as bad as I take a bogey here, I move on to the next par 5, and I try and push for birdie. Whereas, most amateurs do not see it that way. a 15 handicapper hits it to 10 foot, they think they should be hitting it to 3 foot. They're already fuming. Then they go and 3-putt the 10-footer, and they've just compounded 2 errors instead of going, this is okay, and reframing it. It's crazy.
Well, I think that the when you're talking about amateurs, I think amateurs react to shots and tour pros react to patterns.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the biggest difference that I see is like, when you talk to someone, they're like, all right, they'll duff one and be like, right, well, that's it. Well, show me how to get that better. And you're like, well, hit me 9 or 10 more and then we'll talk and we'll see what patterns emerge. And realistically, the more pros I coach and the more people that I get to work with in that environment, the more they'll hit 15, 20 shots and be like, right, okay, so that's what's going on. And you're like, right, well, suddenly you can fix a pattern fixing one shot. It's one shot, right? I mean, we can all hit. That's the kind of beauty of golf, is that we can all hit a shot that a tour pro is capable of, and they can all hit one that we're capable of. And just fixing that one shot, that could be just that one thing. And having the time and patience to be able to sit there and go, okay, hit 10 chips, whether you're trying to do the same thing all the time, because most people, when they come for a golf lesson, seem to want consistency, that magic C word. But most of them don't have a consistent thought process. They can't even think about the same thing shot to shot, yet they want the same outcome, right? So if we can't do that, if we can't keep the input the same, we're never going to get some form of similar output. Then we don't know what we're fixing.
I do. So I probably see most of my guys once a month, and they get what is called their tracker, and on there is like a phase 1, which is 4 weeks of a plan. And if they've been given something to work on, they are working on that for 4 weeks minimum. And if they come back in with the same thing, then either 1, they haven't worked, or 2, they're not doing it enough. It's crazy how they think they can come in for that, whatever it be, 60 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, or whatever it be, and think that is the magic fix. I mean, these guys, you see Rose doing the same thing he's done for the last 5 years in his rehearsal. Every time you see Noren doing the same thing he's done years and years and years. You see Fleetwood doing the same drills. They're all doing the same things. They know their pattern. They know what they need to do to keep that pattern out of play. And it's crazy to think, one lesson, job done, fix. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, I think me and you both have that kind of eureka moment in a few lessons where we go and we fix something like strike. And obviously, especially in my world, we can go from nudging it in front of you to nudging it by the pin. And that's great. But for you to then be able to pull that out of the hat when you've got a tenner with your mates, the only way that's going to be achieved is through reps, right? And then from there, okay, so if you've now got that shot, well, now you've got to play it over a bunker to a short-sided pin, and you need to work on what that works out. So then that's practice. And like you say, I think I saw something with Brett Rumford when I was on coach camp with him, and he said he used to just hit thousands of balls at just like the 80-yard flag, and like he'd go 100 balls to the 80 yards, 100 to 90, 100 to 80, 100, and it's just like mindless repetition. Or not mindless, he was very specific about everything, but that sheer dedication to just that mastery. And he's still one of the best short games I've ever seen live. Like, I watched him at Warren Heath, and it was like the man was cheating. It was ridiculous.
Magical.
It was literally like he was short-sided. He was up against the lip on a bunker shot to like a long-sided bunker. So you're just like, right, no chance. Fizzes it to a foot, and you're just like, okay, right, well, there was a chance. obviously I didn't see it that way, and that's kind of what inspired you to then go, okay, right, I need to figure that out. And then you go, okay, well, actually, it's this and this. So it's really interesting, and it's interesting to hear you say about what you do with your guys with plans, and especially I love that thing about cues and being able to specifically aim at a cue, write it down, because then you're accountable to that cue. And I think the accountability for everyone is key, right?
Yep. I do it every round. I do it as well, because I will still get caught in a trap of seeing a pin that I like, and then you go, yep, I'm having a bit of that. Where's that bit of the green that at minimum gets you a par? And if you hit that mediocre par, if you hit that par that is online, you hold it, fantastic. But mediocre comes first, pars come first, and then anything on top of that is brilliant. But people just want to birdies. They want the birdies.
Way more fun.
It is way more fun. But then I put a poll out last night saying 72 18 pars, 74 5 birdies. And the I think it was like 2-1 ratio, 72 18 pars. But I don't know whether that's because I basically bullied that into everyone, or who
Sure,
knows.
it's not Nick Faldo making loads of
Yeah,
accounts.
yeah, I wish.
Yeah, 100%. Like I think realistically, we all know that score at the end of the day matters. Taking a tenner off your mate or 20 quid off your mate is the best feeling in the world. If 18 pars guaranteed me taking 20 quid off some of my friends, I'd definitely take it. But I think that's, and I think we're all becoming more educated on what good golf actually is. Like, I think through stuff like Decade and Scott Fawcett stuff, and certainly, obviously, I think you follow the same guy as well, Lou Stagner, who is just, they talk so much sense, and it makes us realize that pros averages are just as human as they are, right? And the simple stuff like Tiger has missed on the high side of the pin more often than any other golfer on the planet, and he's Tiger Woods. So little stuff like that starts to add up when you go, well, actually, that's a lot simpler to learn how to not make bogeys than it is to make birdies. And I think even understanding that from a short game perspective, it starts to feed into people's biases when they aim at flags. Like, if you don't know how to hit a high shot, well, you shouldn't be short-sided ever. Like, if you go, okay, well, I don't like hitting up in the air. Okay, well, then you've got no excuse to go for any pin at any point ever. Yeah. Just, if you're really, really, really good at bump and running it, and that is your genuine skill in life, miss everything long-sided and take as much money off your friends as you can, because there's a preference to that, right? I got my eyes opened when I watched Alex Noren around Walton Heath in the US Open qualifying, because there's a lot of dogleg left around there, and he fades it, and I was like, okay, well, this will be really interesting to see how he draws it. And he just didn't, just hit fades to every corner of every fairway, played his shot shape, he made the course play to him rather than the other way around, and he shot 7 under, and I was like, okay, well, that's quite impressive.
On a
arguably
course, on a course that anyone else would say never suits him.
No, that's it. There's so many dogleg lefts, like, it was just ridiculous. But there was a certain hole, I can't remember. I'm really bad at remembering holes at Walton Heath. It's my sort of Achilles heel. And it's slight dogleg left, and everyone was trying to draw a drive around the corner. He at 4 into the corner, flicked it 9-iron on, walked off with par, and made it just look like a walk in the park, and that's qualified for the US Open. Thanks very much. And
that hole that day probably plays 4.2, 4.12, and actually it's made up 0.12 of a shot there, when everyone else is looking at going, this is birdie. They've made bogey from trying to make birdie, whereas he's made par from trying to make par.
I think the best golfers I've seen, and it's the biggest compliment I could give anyone, is they look boring, right? And I think of that as like a short game thing as well, right? I think if you watch the same guy trying to hit the same shot over and over again, it is like the same flight, the same window, the same strike, very similar noise, and you can just see this ball kind of go 1, 2, little spin, release, 1, 2, little spin, release. And don't get me wrong, I'm very lucky to see guys hit shots that even I look at and go, oh my God, that's a joke. Like, started just working with this lad from Challenge Street who hit this shot, and I come out at shin height, and it was so well struck, and this thing spun backwards from 10 yards, and I'm just there like, this is, I had to consider religion at that point. It was ridiculous. It was really, really good. But the other 9 shots didn't quite match up in flight to that. So I was like, that's great if it's 1 out of 10. I was like, right, was your intent the same on every shot? Absolutely. I was like, all right, well, actually, unfortunately, that's impressive. The other 9 less so. So, like, let's figure out a plan to make you more boring. So I think boring is the best compliment I give anyone. Like, when I watched Molinari on the range at Wentworth, which is still the most harrowing thing I've ever seen, it was, if he had a top tracer, he'd hit 20 shots and I'd have seen 1 top tracer. It was just like, I still haven't got over that.
That's one. That's got to have been one of the best things I've heard in a little while. Let's make a plan to make you boring.
Yeah,
it'll be one of my new things, I think.
I just think that realistically, good golf doesn't belong on a highlight reel 9 times out of 10. I just don't, in my opinion. I think that smart shots, even around the short game area. And I know obviously the stuff that sometimes that maybe goes a little bit better on social media isn't the such boring stuff. It's not the like slightly soft landing one. It's the one that goes straight up your nose, and that's cool. And it really is. And I still enjoy playing it when I get 5 minutes around the short game area. I would say that if I had to pull one off in competition, I'd have to have a word with myself about the shot that led me to that shot.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
You know,
right, I'm gonna give you one more question because I know you've got to get away very soon.
that's right.
Fairway lie, difference between an uphill lie and a downhill lie, variable wise.
So I think it.
Let's no, go on. Yeah, let's go. Let's
Yeah, but that we can go to if you want. We can go 2 more. So I think for me, variable wise, uphill is more interesting, and I think gives you more variables than downhill. So because you've got 2 options, you've got the very traditional way of kind of matching everything to slope, and then essentially playing it like a normal shot. And when I say everything, I mean matching shoulder tilts to slope, playing it like a flat golf shot, running the club almost up the hill if you were, and reducing dig. Ball's going to launch out slightly higher, and that's going to work out fine. Obviously, you got option 2, where you lean into the slope, try and take your ball first. I'd say option 1's definitely safer. In my opinion, I think it makes way more sense. But there is also option 2, and again, the whole, I think my job as much as anything is to give people options and tell them how they can make them work, and then go, right, go away and play with it. You tell me how you like it, right? Downhill less so, because we have the fact that the hill's in the way of the club entering the back of the golf ball. So then we do have to realistically start matching tilts to sort of the slope, shoulder tilts definitely, weight forward. And then realistically, you've got the opposite problem, right? You've got a high shot where the ball speed's going to come in a little bit less. We're going to have more initial launch. So we're going to have to combat that some way. Simplest way can be sometimes to just use a lower lofted club. I think a lot of people skip over that one and they start trying to full swing a 58 at it. They just forget that actually, if the hill's adding 8 degrees, they could just take 8 degrees off the loft of their golf club and that would work. And then obviously with the downhill one, we've got to work out, okay, how do I combat the 8 degrees I've lost because of the slopes launching it that little bit lower? And again, then you start playing a very contradictory high shot with shoulders very steep, and you start trying to sort of spin those plates.
Yeah. Just talking about 8-degree slope there, are you talking, we're literally talking about the angle of the slope that will change the angle of the launch the same amount, will it? If you hit the exact same 2 shots?
I think you're going to have to, because of the way you're entering the golf ball, you're going to have to change your prerequisite angle of attack by that much. Therefore, that's going to change the initial launch of the golf ball. So those listening, golf ball launch.
If you had flat lie and it launched at 30 degrees, if you've got an 8-degree slope, it wouldn't. And you hit exactly. You did the variables to get your shoulder tilt the same. It will be 38 degree, or we wouldn't be able to.
Haven't done the testing yet. It sounds like a somewhat of a theory. Obviously, when we look at initial wedge launch, well, we know that the launch is somewhere between the loft and the angle of attack, right? The dynamic loft and the angle of attack. So dependent on the friction requirement. Okay, so the more friction we have on a golf ball, or the more friction, the golf ball and the club face have, the lower it launches. That's why we get that low launching, high spinning shot. It's because of the friction, not the other way around. Okay, so the more friction we have, the more that's going to pull the launch down. Now, if I've got to steepen my angle of attack to miss the slope, I'm going to pull the launch of that golf ball down, whether I like it or not. Yeah, so whether it's a perfect 1-to-1 ratio is not to be seen, but it's certainly going to lower that launch. I can't imagine, like for me, if I chuck that loft up, and again, if I then sort of catch it, it's going to sound weird, but slightly heavy, lose friction, that ball's actually going to launch higher. And that's the stupid thing about it.
These 2 light fittings.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
what about What about uphill lie? So this probably another that people won't know about, and I'll let you explain. What about uphill lie, high lofted? So stay with the 58, more roll up the face or less roll up the face, causing what sort of launch? Is that a variable or is that not a variable?
So, interestingly enough, and this is where I'd want to see a little bit more data done. So, strike location doesn't really change spin rate.
Okay. But would it change launch?
Pardon?
Would it change launch?
So the uphill slope, because again, depends which option you pick, right? So option one, where we slide that club up the slope, we're obviously shallowing out angle of attack. Therefore, we've got less of a downward angle. Ball's going to launch higher. Option two, where we drive that club into the slope, we're going to see that lower launch angle. So again, that's where you're playing a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Yeah. And I'm going to be that annoying guy and say it depends on which option you've chosen. It also depends again on the friction component of the shot, because if I have that ball and I catch it perfectly clean and there's no interference, again, I'm going to really weirdly start launching it lower than if I catch it ever so slightly heavy and get a bit of grass between ball and have it pop up on the loft.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Right, Lewis, how does anybody that will listen to this find you?
So I am Lewis Savill Golf everywhere. So my website is www.lewissavill.com and my Instagram is literally Lewis Savill Golf.
Brilliant. And Skillist as well?
Skillist, yeah, do online lessons on Skillist. It's been really quite fun doing the online coaching stuff. Being able to coach anywhere in the world via an iPad is pretty mental. And I don't know about you, but I still find it weird when I'm freezing cold, I've got 4 jackets on, and I'm doing a demo for someone who's in shorts.
Yeah, I can't say I enjoy that part of it, but
it's sort of a weird part of me that's just like, yeah, this is really weird right now.
Yeah.
I've got a few guys that I coach in Oz, and it's offensive at the moment. Like, it really is. If anyone's listening back to this, it's currently the 11th of January. My God, like, I'm genuinely coaching these guys, and they're in a heat wave, and I've genuinely just almost had to get a pickaxe out on the chipping green.
It is a nightmare. It is a nightmare. Anyway, Lewis, one, I appreciate you coming on in very short notice because obviously, unfortunate terms had someone pull out, but appreciate it a lot. We will probably do another one that will go dive into this a lot deeper, hopefully at some point. Hopefully this will grow to a point where it will be pretty crazy, but really appreciate coming on, appreciate your time, and we'll speak very soon.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's been awesome. It's been really, really fun geeking out with you about performance, short game, and everything. So cheers, mate. I appreciate it.
Thank you.